The night began like any other, heavy, suffocating, silent. Gotham was dying beneath a bruised sky, its towers bleeding light into a storm that wasn't born of weather. The rain didn't fall. It hissed like acid on stone. The air tasted of iron and electricity. In the shadows between skyscrapers, Bruce Wayne stood on the edge of a world he no longer understood. He had faced gods before, but this storm was different. The sky wasn't breaking, it was opening. The first tear appeared over Wayne Tower. It was small at first, a fracture in the fabric of reality that pulsed with impossible color. Then it widened, and the stars bent inward as if being devoured. The city's power grids died one after another, leaving only the glow of that wound in the heavens. Through it, whispers spilled foreign, ancient, seductive. Voices that promised order through surrender, peace through transformation. Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. "Not tonight," he muttered, as though defiance itself could silence the cosmos. He reached for the grapple hook, scanning the skyline, but the storm distorted everything. Gravity shifted. Buildings folded in directions they weren't built to move. A sound like breaking glass rippled through the air, and then the screaming began. People were vanishing, not dying, not burning, just disappearing. Pulled upward by invisible strings, their bodies twisting into streaks of light. He moved fast, too fast for a mortal eye to track, catching those he could. But every person he touched shimmered, flickered, and dissolved in his arms. The warp doesn't take, it consumes. And the more he fought it, the more it recognized him. Order, the voices whispered, hundreds overlapping in harmony and discord. Justice, control, you seek them still. We can show you their true form. He ignored them, eyes locked on the crack in the sky. The Batwing's engines roared through the maelstrom as he ascended into madness. Instruments failed instantly. Gauges spun wild. The autopilot screamed warnings in a dozen different languages. He didn't care. Gotham was breaking apart below him, blocks folding in on themselves like paper burned from the inside. He couldn't let it spread. He couldn't let them win. Then the lightning came. Not white, not blue, but alive. Tendrils of light wrapped around the Batwing, searing the hull, clawing at reality itself. He felt it in his bones, a vibration like the heartbeat of a god. Every shadow around him twisted, gaining faces, teeth, and tongues. They whispered his name, Bruce Wayne, the orphan, the warrior, the liar, the god who denies divinity. He pulled the ejection lever, but the seat didn't fire. The world was already gone. The cockpit melted away, replaced by liquid stars and screaming light. His mind fractured images of his parents, Alfred, the endless graves of Gotham all bleeding together. He wasn't falling anymore. He was unmaking. Something cold brushed his thoughts. A presence, vast and patient. It didn't speak in words, it spoke in realization. "You were never a man of light," it murmured. "You were always ours." He tried to answer, but language meant nothing here. The cowl dissolved from his face. His armor disintegrated like ash in a solar flare. He reached for his chest, for the symbol that had once meant something, but even that was burning away. All that remained was Willand. Even that began to crack. He screamed into the void, not in fear, but in defiance. The warp trembled. Somewhere, something old and curious took notice. It watched this mortal who refused surrender and whispered to the others, "Let him fall. Let him learn." And so, Bruce Wayne, the Bat of Gotham, fell through eternity into the mouth of chaos. the storm closed behind him, sealing Earth away forever. In the silence that followed, only one question echoed through the dying stars. What becomes of a man who makes war on gods when the gods make war on him? There is no up or down in the warp-only motion, ceaseless and hungry. Batman fell through it like a spark through oil, each second stretching into centuries of pain. The air was alive here. It breathed around him, pressed against his skin, slid into his lungs like fire. His mind fractured again and again under the weight of unreality. There were colors that had no name, sounds that didn't belong to any sense, and whispers that became shapes. Each one wore a different voice, his father's, his mother's, Alfred's, Bruce. One murmured in Thomas Wayne's tone, "Stop fighting. There's peace here." He clenched his fists, fighting to remember the difference between illusion and self. His gauntlets flickered in and out of existence. Metal, bone, shadow, light. "You're not real," he growled through clenched teeth. "You're not them," the warp laughed, not as mockery, but as admiration. It loves those who resist. It feeds on struggle. Around him, fragments of Gotham drifted like shattered memories. The clock tower spun through a storm of fire. The bat signal flickered in and out of the void, and 1,000 bats formed and unformed from liquid darkness. They flew in circles around him, their wings whispering his failures. You couldn't save them. You couldn't save yourself. You fight to stop the inevitable. He roared into the storm, and the storm roared back. The warp was not a place, was an emotion, the universe's madness given shape. It felt his defiance and answered it with reflection. The more he resisted, the more it mirrored him. His rage became thunder. His grief became flame. His justice became teeth. Then came the first vision. He saw himself, cloaked in living darkness, standing before the burning ruins of the Imperium, a galaxy consumed by his will. The stars bowed to him, and a throne of bones waited. It should have repulsed him, but part of him recognized the symmetry. Fear had always been his tool. In this place, fear was faith. He collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath that no longer existed. His heartbeat echoed like a drum through the void. Every thud tore a hole in reality. From one of those holes, something crawled out. It was tall, too tall, its limbs made of shadow and light. Its head was crowned with burning sigils that changed every second. 1,000 eyes blinked open across its chest, all staring at him. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere and nowhere. "You are not the first mortal to fall here," it said, "but you may be the first to endure." Batman forced himself to stand. "Who are you?" The creature tilted its head, a question asked in defiance. "Good. We are many, but one name will suffice. Desiench, the architect of fate." The air shimmered. The god's voice was silk and thunder. "You built your life on fear and control, little knight. You shaped men's souls as I shape destinies. You are mine in spirit, even if you deny it." "I don't serve anyone," Bruce spat. His body flickered again, his armor phasing between metal and flesh. "Not you, not anyone," Desiench smiled, or something like it. The shape of its face changed, cycling through Alfred, Roz, Al Ghul, the Joker, and back to something unnameable. "You already serve, child. You serve order. That is the purest illusion of all." The warp pulsed around them, a living ocean reacting to every word. The god extended one clawed hand. "Join me, and I will show you the truth behind every mask." the power to control chaos itself. Batman hesitated. For a heartbeat, he saw the city again, the skyline, the rain, the people who depended on him. Then the vision cracked, bleeding warp light. It wasn't Gotham anymore. It was something older, deeper. A world built from dreams of control and terror. He looked back at the god. "If you think I'll kneel, you don't know me." Dazinch's laughter was like a storm tearing through stars. "Oh, I know you, mortal. That's why I chose you." The light around them twisted, folding inward like a dying sun. Before he could move, tendrils of living fire reached out, piercing through his mind and soul. He screamed not from pain, but from the realization that the warp was inside him now, learning him, reshaping him, and somewhere in the infinite dark, a whisper answered, "And you, Batman, will teach it to fear." When he awoke, there was no sense of time, only a dull ache that stretched beyond the body. His mind floated in fragments, scattered through the warp like shattered glass, drifting in an endless tide. Each piece carried a memory, a fight, a vow, a death he could not prevent. For the first time, Bruce Wayne understood what eternity felt like. It wasn't peace. It was a mirror that never stopped reflecting. He tried to stand, but his body refused to obey. The ground beneath him pulsed like muscle, wet and breathing. It smelled of ozone, rust, and blood. Above him stretched a sky of burning equation symbols, rearranging themselves into words he could almost understand. He realized then that language itself was alive here. Words slithering like serpents through thought. A figure approached, walking on nothing, cloaked in smoke, wrapped in feathers made of glass. Its face was a constant blur, an image trying and failing to stabilize. Bruce felt every part of his mind scream against its presence. Dazinch, again but smaller, a fragment, a shadow cast by something incomprehensible. "You are still resisting," the voice said, distant and near at once. "You cling to an illusion called self." Batman's hand twitched toward where his utility belt should have been. The instinct was pointless. There were no gadgets here, no allies, no rules. "I've lived my life fighting illusions," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "You're just another mask." The air trembled as the god's reflection circled him like a vulture. "Every mask hides truth. You wore one to fight your world's chaos. But what happens, little knight, when chaos fights back?" He took a step forward. Each motion felt like walking through oil and gravity at war. "I don't break. Not yet." The warp pulsed, amused. "But you will reshape." Tinch gestured, and suddenly the darkness around them filled with visions, millions of them, rippling like pages of a book written by madness. In one, Batman saw himself standing atop the Imperial Palace of Terror, crowned in fire. In another, he knelt before a colossal figure of light, his armor drenched in the blood of saints. In all of them, he was not Bruce Wayne anymore. He was something else. The god's voice whispered through the storms. "I see a truth even the Emperor once feared. Chaos does not destroy, it reveals. Beneath your order lies a deeper faith, a faith in control. Is that not chaos in its purest form?" Bruce staggered, the thought burning through him like molten iron. Every scar, every crusade, every rule, what was it, for if not to impose his will upon a lawless world? He had always believed in order, but order had demanded fear, control, power. How different was he, truly, from the beings he hunted? The god leaned closer, its 1,000 eyes reflecting his doubt. You call yourself the Bat, but in this realm, symbols are souls. You have always been a creature of the warp, you just never knew it. Bruce's fists clenched. If you think you can twist me into one of your monsters, you're wrong. The warp shivered laughter like a choir of breaking glass. We do not twist, Batman. We magnify. The knight who swore to fight darkness becomes the darkness itself. That is the law of existence. The ground beneath him erupted. Hands, burning, skeletal, made of smoke, grasped at him from below. They were his victims, his enemies, his allies, all fused together into a single, shrieking entity. He could see the faces of the Joker, Two-Face, Selina, Alfred, all of them screaming one word: why? He dropped to his knees, the weight of every failure crushing his chest. His breath came ragged, his heart beat a thunderclap in the silence. The warp tightened around him like a fist. Tzeentch's final whisper cut through everything. You are not falling, Batman. You are evolving. The world exploded into blue fire. For one perfect instant, he saw everything: the design of galaxies, the gears of the Imperium, the madness of gods. His mortal mind should have shattered. It didn't. It adapted, and through the fire, through the chaos and screams, one phrase echoed again and again, burning into the fabric of his soul. I am the night. When the light cleared, he stood. His armor had changed, blackened metal, fused with demonic veins, pulsing faint warp light. The symbol on his chest was gone, replaced by something alive, something that breathed. The Bat was dead. What rose in his place was the beginning of the Chaos Knight. When the warp finally released him, it was not mercy, it was curiosity. Batman awoke within a landscape that defied sanity. Mountains rose upside down, their peaks clawing into seas of flame. Rivers of mercury reflected faces that weren't his own, and the air was filled with the slow, deliberate breathing of something watching. The sky was not sky at all, but an open, wound, bleeding, colorless light across. A world made of thought and memory. He stood in silence, his new armor whispering with every motion. It wasn't forged from steel anymore. It was alive, pulsating faintly, veins of warp light crawling across its surface like serpents of blue fire. Every breath he took was heavy with dust and whispers. He didn't know where he was, but his instincts, those relentless, calculating instincts, refused to die. He walked. Each step echoed for miles. The ground shifted beneath him, rearranging itself into images of Gotham. The alleys he knew so well stretched before him, but they were wrong, too narrow, too endless. The shadows had faces. Bats hung from twisted lampposts, their wings stretching like banners of skin. Somewhere far away, he heard laughter, soft at first, then sharper, familiar in all the worst ways. The Joker's voice, "Welcome home." Batsy, Bruce turned, and there he was, something pretending to be him. The figure wore the Joker's grin, but its skin was made of mirror shards, each reflecting a different world. Its eyes glowed with the same warp fire that now coursed through Bruce's veins. "This isn't real," Bruce muttered. Double quotes. "Oh, but what is?" The thing laughed, stepping closer, shards slicing reality with every movement. "You've been fighting illusions your whole life. Now you live in one." Batman lunged forward, fist striking the creature square in the jaw. The impact shattered it into 1,000 mirrors, each fragment spinning away, carrying an echo of the Joker's laughter. For a brief second, his own reflection stared back from those pieces' eyes, burning gold. Then the world itself shifted. Towers rose from the ground like bones through flesh. Gothic spires twisted together, forming an impossible citadel, a cathedral made for something that should never be worshipped. At its highest point sat a throne of stone and light, flanked by towering statues whose faces were veiled in smoke. He didn't need to be told. He was being summoned. The climb felt endless. With every step, he heard the city whisper to him, voices from every life he had ever touched, criminals, victims, alleys, all repeating one sentence. You thought you could control the night. When he reached the top, the doors opened by themselves. Inside, light poured like blood from unseen stars. The hall was lined with figures cloaked in darkness, each wearing masks that mirrored the faces of chaos. They were not demons. They were ideas given shape. War, hunger, ambition, madness, all seated in judgment. At the center stood a creature draped in gold and blue, its body made of shifting runes. Its face was a paradox, beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. Zench, Bruce whispered. The god smiled. You learn quickly. What do you want from me? To see if you can survive yourself, the god said. You stand in the court of shadows, where mortals are measured not by what they are, but by what they could become. The other figures began to move, their eyes glowing with unholy light. They circled him like predators. One wore the armor of the Adeptus Custodes, but its body was rotted, crawling with serpents of light. Another resembled a space marine, yet its armor bore the 8-pointed star of chaos. They spoke without mouths, their words echoing through thought. He is not of this galaxy. He bleeds truth. It will not last. He seeks order in the domain of gods. Descench raised a hand, silencing them. Let him speak. Batman straightened, his cape burning at the edges. I didn't ask to be here, but if I'm trapped, I'll make use of it. You think you can test me? Measure me. I've already been judged by worse. The hall quivered. Some of the shadows recoiled. The god's laughter was soft, but endless. Arrogance, fear, control, the same tools you wielded against your world. You may survive, mortal, but only if you embrace what you truly are. And what's that? Bruce growled. Desnich's eyes burned brighter than the warp itself. A symbol. Symbols cannot die, but they can evolve. The floor beneath him split apart. The throne crumbled. The walls stretched away into infinity. He fell again through layers of memory, through every life he'd ever lived, every choice he'd ever made. Somewhere in the dark, he heard Alfred's voice, calm and sad. Master Wayne, sometimes the only way to save the city is to let it burn. And as the court of shadows vanished into screaming light, Batman realized he was no longer falling, he was descending. The descent felt like falling through a heartbeat. The world contracted and expanded around him, folding into impossible shapes, until he landed hard on a surface that wasn't stone but the idea of stoner texture formed by memory. His armor screamed as it reformed around his body, plates flexing like living skin. The warp breathed in rhythm with him now. Each inhale drew in the whispers of 1,000 unseen entities. Each exhale sent them scattering. He stood in a chamber illuminated by floating candles of green fire. Each flame burned without heat, suspended in midair, and inside every flame something writhed. Souls, perhaps, or thoughts that refused to die. The chamber stretched endlessly, yet the walls felt close, like being trapped inside a dream that was aware of you. A sound echoed in the distance, boots striking stone. Slow, deliberate. From the far shadows emerged figures clad in ancient armor that bore the sigil of the imperial Aquila, but it was broken, inverted, reformed into a new mark. These were knights, once loyal to the Imperium, now warped beyond recognition. Their armor bled light from the cracks, their helmets fused with bone. They knelt as Batman approached. Their leader rose. His voice was dry and hollow, like parchment being torn. "You were summoned, mortal who fell. The court has deemed you unbroken." Batman's voice was steady. "And if I don't answer, then you will remain between the folds of the warp forever, never living, never ending." There is no defiance here, only transformation. He walked forward, cape dragging against the floor, its edges dissolving into smoke. The court's knights watched in silence. In their eyes burned the same light that pulsed in his chest. He was one of them already, though he would not admit it. They led him through corridors carved from living flesh, their walls whispering names he did not recognize. Some begged for mercy, others begged for release. At the end of the hall stood a massive gate formed from bones that still twitched with faint life. He pressed his hand against it, and it opened without sound. The throne room was vast and terrible. Columns of obsidian twisted like vertebrae into the clouds. Rivers of molten silver ran through grooves in the floor, carrying reflections of faces that watched and judged. Upon a dais of black marble sat the figure he had seen before, reflection of Sinjet. But this one solidified, taking the form of something regal and monstrous. Its voice filled the chamber and his mind alike. "You have resisted the warp and lived. You have defied gods and endured. But survival is not strength, Batman. It is potential." He stepped forward. "You dragged me here. You want something?" Laughter rolled through the chamber. "Always suspicion. Always control. You still cling to order, even as your soul unravels." "I don't kneel," the god smiled. "Then stand and bear witness." The air rippled, and from the floor rose phantoms versions of himself. One wore golden armor like an Astartes, his symbol replaced by the imperial Aquila. Another stood cloaked in crimson flame, eyes burning with hatred, a servant of Khorne. A third, draped in rot and sorrow, whispered prayers to Nurgle. And yet another shifted between all colors, its every breath rewriting reality its inches favorite. They surrounded him, reflections of what he could become. "Choose," the god said. "You cannot fight eternity. You must join it. Which path will you walk, Knight of Chaos?" Batman stared at the visions. Each one represented a truth he had. Buried, rage, grief, order, ambition. Every part of him that made him who he was had been dissected, laid bare. He didn't answer. Instead, he closed his eyes and did what he had always done: observe. When he opened them, the visions had stopped moving. He stepped toward the golden one and tore its helmet away. Beneath it was his own face, hollow-eyed and lifeless. "No," he said quietly. "I've already walked this path." He turned toward the red one. "Rage is weakness." Toward the green one. "Decay is surrender." His gaze locked onto the shifting figure, the reflection that would not settle. "You," the god inclined its head. "The architect of fate always leaves room for choice." Batman's hand reached toward the mirage. The light between them flared, swallowing the chamber in brilliance. When it faded, the illusions were gone. The god's laughter faded into a low hum of satisfaction. "You have not chosen, yet the warp has chosen for you," it said. "You are not servant nor slave. You are balance. Chaos given discipline. The paradox incarnate. The ground shook, splitting open beneath him. From the fissure rose the remnants of his city, twisted into the architecture of the Imperium spires, gargoyles, citadels, all formed from the bones of Gotham's dead. The symbol of the bat stretched across the horizon, burning like a brand upon the warp itself. Dzench's voice whispered through the rising storm. "You have built a new order in my image, Bruce Wayne. Welcome to your kingdom, the Court of Shadows reborn." And as he stood among the ruins of everything he had ever been, he realized something horrifying. It felt right. The storm above the citadel did not roar. It whispered. Each bolt of warp lightning struck in rhythm with his heartbeat. Each gust of wind carried 1,000 voices chanting his name, not in reverence but in recognition. Batman stood atop the highest spire, the crown of this impossible structure his will had forged. The Court of Shadows stretched below him, endless and alive. Its towers breathed, its halls pulsed, and its walls wept light. He did not remember building it, yet it bore his design. Every arch and shadow echoed Gotham's bones, reimagined through the madness of chaos. He looked down at his hands. The gauntlets were heavier now, fused with veins of black crystal that pulsed faintly with blue fire. The bat symbol across his chest was no longer an emblem, it was a living scar, breathing, whispering. He could feel the warp inside it, a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Every motion sent tremors through the ground. Every thought shaped the world around him. So this was what it meant to rule chaos, not to command, but to become command itself. His city was not built by tools, but by will. And yet, for all its power, it reeked of illusion. His detective's mind sharp, even in madness, saw the pattern underneath. The warp had given him what it thought he wanted: control, order, but it was only the reflection of desire, not fulfillment. "Do you understand now?" came a voice behind him. He turned slowly. A figure stood there, hooded, armored in silver that shimmered between existence and dream. Its face was half his own. The other half was something else, entirely shattered porcelain and fire. "What are you?" Bruce asked. The figure smiled faintly. "I am what remains of the man you were. Logic, restraint, fear." The detective, Batman, stared at him in silence. "And what are you doing here?" "Fighting you," the reflection said simply. "Because if I don't, there will be nothing left to save." They circled one another. Around them, the court trembled, as if waiting for its creator to decide its fate. The air grew thick, the warp holding its breath. Then, without warning, they struck. Their clash was silent sound, had no meaning here. Fist met fist, thought met thought, will met will. Each blow sent ripples through the air, tearing through the architecture of his mind. The reflection fought with precision, cold, calculated, every move a reminder of discipline. Batman fought like a storm, relentless and merciless, strength born from chaos itself. "Do you think this makes you powerful?" The reflection hissed as their blades locked. "You're not mastering chaos, Bruce, you're drowning in it." "I've drowned before," Batman growled. "I always rise." The reflection's smile faltered. "Then rise alone." He plunged the blade into Bruce's chest. It should have killed him, but instead of blood, warp fire spilled out, cascading across the spire like liquid light. The reflection staggered back, horror spreading across its perfect face as the flame crawled up his arm, consuming him. "Do you see now?" Batman said, voice echoing with 1,000 harmonics. "You can't kill what the warp made eternal." The reflection screamed as it was devoured, its voice fracturing into echoes that joined the storm. For a moment, Bruce felt something break inside him, not pain, not loss, but finality. The part of him that had resisted, that had clung to reason and morality, was gone. Burned away, the fire settled, and silence returned. The god's inch materialized once more, its form shifting between forms, man, serpent, machine. "You've done it," the god murmured. "You've purged yourself. Now there is nothing left to resist destiny." Batman didn't answer. He stared at his gauntlets again, now glowing faintly red beneath the blue. His reflection was gone. The court around him waited, kneeling shadows of thought and faith. Dizzy Ench stepped closer. "Kneel, Chaos Knight. Take your place among the gods." He turned, eyes burning gold like twin suns. "I don't kneel." The warp trembled at his defiance. The god's laughter rippled through the world, but it was less certain now. Touched by something alien fear. "Then rule," Tianch said softly, and as the god vanished into smoke, the court of shadows bowed to its new master, not in worship, but in surrender. Batman stood alone in the storm, the warp pulsing with his will. The voice that had once whispered his name now fell silent, replaced by a deeper truth that resonated through the void. He was no longer the Bat of Gotham, he was its god. The warp was silent for the first time since his arrival. It was not peace. It was expectation, the pause before creation, the breath before apocalypse. Batman stood at the center of what remained of the Court of Shadows, its spires now bent inward like ribs around a heart. That heart was him. Every pulse of his veins sent a tremor through the realm, reshaping it, refining it. Where once there had been chaos without pattern, now there was structure, a terrible kind of order born from madness itself. He could feel it, the warp trying to understand him. It studied his mind as a scientist studies a specimen. It mirrored his thoughts, but his thoughts were sharper now, more disciplined, honed by centuries of surviving Gotham's darkness. The warp was infinite, but he had been born inside chaos long before he ever fell into it. This was no different. It was only larger, louder. From the mist rose figures, again not illusions this time, but the demons of Sinche, their forms grotesque and impossible. Eyes blinked across wings that folded into mouths. Fire burned backward, freezing light into shadow. They circled him, cautious, reverent, but curious. He could feel their hunger, the need to devour him, to pull him back into the current of the warp. But when one dared to approach, it recoiled as his gaze met its own. His eyes no longer reflected humanity. They burned with golden warp flame, twin voids of purpose and command. The creature screamed, its body unraveling into a stream of glyphs that vanished into the air. The others knelt. They didn't understand why, they only felt it. A new law written into existence. Batman had become something the warp had never known before, control within chaos. He turned toward the horizon. There was no end to it, just layers upon layers of nightmare folding over themselves. Somewhere, deep in the infinite distance, he could sense the chaos Godscorn's rage, Nurgle's rot, Slonish's temptation, Disinch's deceit. They were aware of him now. They watched, intrigued, perhaps even cautious. A voice broke the silence. "You've done what no mortal has, Batman. You've turned chaos into discipline. You've made fear into faith." He didn't turn to face it. He didn't need to. "You again," he said. "You never leave, do you?" The air shimmered, and Tezinch appeared once more, this time, its form less monstrous, more human. Its voice carried the weight of amusement. I am the architect of fate, and you, my greatest paradox. I didn't do this for you. No, the god said, circling him. You did it because you can't stop building cages. Every prison, every symbol, every lawyer life's work is a hymn to control. And now you've built the greatest one of all. Batman finally turned, his armor gleaming with veins of molten light. If this is a cage, then I'll be its warden. Dzinj smiled, feathers rippling across its shoulders. And who will you imprison, Chaos Knight? The demons who kneel before you, or the gods who created them? He said nothing. His silence was answer enough. The god extended a hand. Then rise, Daemon Prince. Claim what you've earned. The ground split, and from the fissure rose a figure carved from the essence of the warper form, shaped in his image, but built for war. It was armor fused with life, a second skin of nightmares and justice. The symbol of the bat spread across its chest, not painted, but seared in holy flame. The armor breathed, growled, flexed. It was alive, sentient, waiting for him. He stepped forward. The moment his hand touched it, the world convulsed. Energy poured through him like a solar storm. His scream echoed across dimensions, but it wasn't pain, it was awakening. The warp recognized its new prince. Demons fell to their knees, their forms twisting into worship. The skies above shattered into storms of light. Dzinj's laughter filled every corner of reality, but even the god's voice trembled beneath the weight of what had just been born. When the light subsided, the figure that stood was not Batman. The bat symbol had grown into a sigil of dominion, an 8-pointed mark fused with wings. His cape burned like black fire, his armor thrummed like a beating heart. His voice carried across the void, neither mortal nor divine. I am not your pawn, he said. I am your consequence. The warp flinched. The gods stirred. Even Tzeentch took a step back, because for the first time in eternity, chaos had created something it could not predict. The Daemon Prince of Order, the Chaos Knight, had been born. The storms of the warp had quieted, but the silence was alive, tense, quivering, as though the whole realm was waiting to exhale. Batman, no, the being that had once been him, stood amidst a horizon of molten sky. His armor hummed with the pulse of newborn reality. It was no longer separate from him. It was him. When he moved, the world rippled. When he breathed, creation shivered. Across the endless expanse, shapes began to crawl from the glow. Demons, heretics, twisted remnants of human thought given form. They approached in reverent terror, and he saw himself reflected in their warped faces. Predator and protector fused together. The air trembled with their chant, not of worship, but of recognition. Chaos Knight, Lord of Paradox. The title echoed through the dimension like a curse wrapped in prayer. He did not want it, yet he understood it. He had become the equilibrium of madness, a creature forged from contradiction. Justice born from corruption. Discipline carved into the flesh of chaos. He raised his hand, and the demons fell silent. Their eyes bled light, their voices swallowed by his will. No gods, he said softly. Only judgment. For a moment, even the warp hesitated. Then the horizon split, and a sea of fire spilled outward, stretching into infinity. From within that inferno came something ancient, older than the stars that lit the Imperium. The warp parted as four vast presences emerged, unseen but felt in every atom. The Chaos Gods had come to witness their new creation. First came Khorne, the Warfather, his presence a storm of endless battle cries and clashing blades. Then Nurgle, vast and patient, dripping decay and laughter. Slaanesh followed, seductive and shimmering, her voice the music of temptation and ruin. And at last, Sinch, radiant with shifting patterns, its laughter soft and endless. Batman stood before them not in awe, but in scrutiny. He felt their power pressing down like the weight of a dying star. His armor cracked and bled light, but he did not kneel. Khorne's voice thundered first, a growl that shook reality. This mortal defies gods. Nurgle chuckled, his words bubbling with rot. He reeks of fear and resilience, a fine addition to decay. Slaanesh's whispers slid like silk through the air, or perhaps a thing too perfect to destroy. A soul stretched thin between agony and grace. Desianch only smiled, feathers rippling like oceans of glass. He is none of yours. He is mine. The air around Batman ignited. For realities collided: the scent of blood, the taste of despair, the touch of pleasure, the sound of destiny. His mind should have broken, but he had lived through worse. Gotham had been his crucible. This was merely the end of that logic. He lifted his gaze. You fight over me as if I belonged to any of you. I've seen what happens to those who kneel. They rot, they vanish. I am not your servant. Khorne roared, raising a blade the size of countenance. Then you will die standing. The sword fell, but it never reached him. He caught it between his gauntlets, warp energy surging through his veins like lightning through iron. The impact split the ground, sending shockwaves across the dimension. Even the gods recoiled as blue fire erupted from him, carving sigils into the air. When the smoke cleared, the blade of Khorne lay in pieces. Batman stood, cloak burning with black flame, his voice calm, almost gentle. You mistake me for mortal. I am order. I am will. And if I must rule this madness to make it obey, then I will. Tzeentch's laughter broke the silence. Perfect, it hissed. The universe devours itself and calls it order. You are our reflection, Batman, our failure made flesh. But the god was smiling. The warp shuddered and bent around the Chaos Knight, pulling his essence into something vast, divine, uncontainable. The gods withdrew, watching as their creation rose beyond even their design, and far away. In some forgotten corner of the Materium, a Psyker woke, screaming from a dream of a bat made of stars, whispering one word into the void: ascension. The void beyond him rippled like a living pulse. Each tremor carried the echo of what he had just become, intelligence so precise that even gods hesitated to approach it. Batman floated between storms of color, the newborn armor tightening around him as if it were both prison and second skin. Every fragment of the warp now obeyed his rhythm. Thought had replaced gravity. Memory had become matter, but creation is never silent. From the far edge of this new dominion came a low, grinding hum, a voice not made of words but of inevitability. The four gods had retreated into their separate realms, yet their influence crawled back through fissures in the warp-like veins of poison. Khorne's rage bled into the skies, painting lightning in crimson arcs. Slaanesh's whispers drifted through the wind, honeyed and cruel. Nurgle's laughter swelled beneath the ground, and the air tasted of rot. Above them all, Tzeentch's laughter lingered soft, knowing. Eternal. Batman felt their eyes again, but this time they were not watching a toy. They were watching a threat. He raised his hand. The warp froze. The colors halted mid-motion, the storms pausing as if afraid. His voice rolled out like iron through flame. You sent me here to be unmade. You failed. The sound traveled farther than sound should, cutting through layers of existence. Mortal psychers screamed across the galaxy, feeling the pressure of a will that had never been meant to touch theirs. Even the Astronomicon flickered for a single heartbeat as his declaration carved itself into reality's skin. And then, in that unnatural stillness, he heard something he had not expected, a human voice. Bruce. He turned sharply. Through the haze walked a silhouette, thin, calm, familiar. Alfred Pennyworth stood before him, untouched by the warp, as steady as memory itself. His presence should have been impossible. Master Wayne, the vision said softly, you've built another hell. For the first time since his fall, Batman faltered. You're not real. Perhaps not, Alfred replied. But neither are you, not anymore. He stepped closer, looking up into the golden blaze that had replaced his master's eyes. You fought monsters so long that you forgot what saving felt like. Tell me, when was the last time you tried? The words struck harder than any god's blow. Batman's fists tightened, warp light bleeding through his knuckles. I am saving them. I'm controlling the chaos before it destroys everything. Alfred's gaze was kind, but unflinching. You can't save the galaxy by becoming what you fear. For an instant, the warp around them flickered, showing the shadows of 1,000 faces, Gotham citizens, the soldiers of the Imperium, even the lost of terror, all of them staring, silent, waiting. I gave my soul to stop the darkness, Batman said. Alfred's voice became a whisper, and it thanked you by giving you its crown. Then he was gone, fading like smoke. Silence returned. The warp shifted uneasily, and Batman felt the fracture within himself widen. The part that was still human trembled, small and frail, buried beneath divine machinery. He looked down at his hands again, the power that pulsed like a heartbeat of the universe, and for the first time, he wondered if he could still let go. Behind him, the horizon cracked open. From its depths, a voice older than all creation spoke. Neither kind nor cruel, only true. You cannot unmake what you have become. He turned toward it. The shadows formed wings behind him, vast and terrible, stretching across infinity. The armor flared with both glory and ruin. He did not smile, nor did he weep. I won't unmake it, he said quietly. I'll use it. And as he stepped into the rift, leaving his court and gods behind, the warp convulsed one final time, acknowledging its new ruler, its cursed son, its perfect paradox. The Daemon Prince of Order vanished into the storm, and the universe whispered a new name into the void, the Chaos Knight. The warp was behind him, but it was never gone. It lingered in every atom of his being, whispering in the silence between thoughts. The Chaos Knight walked across the endless black, where stars burned like the eyes of dying gods. He had crossed from madness into creation, from chaos into something worse, clarity. He could feel the universe now. Every current of power and faith, every scream of dying worlds, every faint prayer reaching toward the Emperor's throne on Terra. It all pulsed through him like a heartbeat. That wasn't his own. He no longer needed to breathe, yet he did. He no longer needed to think, yet he chose to. That was what separated him from the gods. They were instinct, pure and eternal. He was will-refined, shaped, unyielding. Where the warp had sought to absorb him, he had carved order from it, leaving scars that still bled light across eternity. He drifted through the void, neither mortal nor divine. Fragments of the Imperium came to him like echoes planets burning, ships breaking apart, the desperate voices of the Astra Militarum crying for help across broken Vox channels. He saw the Custodes standing guard over a throne that devoured a god's body, the priests of Mars whispering to their machines, and 1,000 inquisitors burning whole worlds in the name of purity. The Imperium was chaos, pretending to be order. He understood that now, and then he saw Itan Imperial Warfleet adrift near a dying sun. He heard their prayers through the void, static and pain wrapped in desperate faith. He felt their fear when they saw him, a winged shadow outlined by the crimson glow of a star. They thought it was death coming for them. They were wrong. He descended slowly, the void bending beneath him, his form half shadow, half fire. The fleet's auspex screamed in terror as every machine spirit on every ship fell silent. Their Emperor's light dimmed, swallowed by something older and closer. On the flagship Avenger of Soul, the chapter master of the Ultramarines stood on the command deck, sword in hand, voice trembling as he whispered a prayer in the Emperor's name. Batman's voice, amplified by the vacuum, reached them without sound. It was not loud. It was absolute. Your Emperor does not answer. He sleeps in his tomb. You burn in his name, but you do not understand what you worship. They saw his face, or what was left of it. The cowl had fused to the armor. The eyes were twin golden suns. His voice carried through the ship's Vox systems as if reality itself transmitted it. I have seen your gods. They are parasites. I have walked their domains and left them bleeding. You speak of purity and justice while serving madness wearing a halo. Who are you? The chapter master demanded, his faith trembling but not broken. The Chaos Knight stepped onto the deck, his presence warping gravity, his shadow spreading across the walls like liquid night. Once, he said, I was a man who thought justice was order. But I learned that order is a lie without will to enforce it. He extended his hand. The lights of the ship flickered. Your Imperium drowns in its own chains. I will show you what it means to rule without fear. The Marines raised their weapons. Bolters screamed. The Chaos Knight didn't move. The rounds froze mid-air, suspended by invisible pressure, then turned, one by one, spinning gently before disintegrating. The men behind them fell to their knees, weeping not from pain, but from revelation. They saw visions in his presence of the Emperor not as a god, but as a man begging for rest, of terror burning, of a new dawn rising from the ashes. Batman stood before them, his voice softer now. I am not your enemy. I am what your Emperor tried to become. And as he spoke, the dying sun behind the fleet flared to life again, its color changing from red to pure white. It burned with impossible brilliance, casting light across the void. Every sensor on every ship registered one impossible truth. The dying star had been reborn, for the first time in 10,000 years. The Imperium witnessed creation instead of destruction, and they fell to their knees not in worship, but in awe. The Chaos Knight turned his gaze toward the stars, where the light of the Astronomicon shimmered faintly in the distance. He could feel the Emperor's presence like a faint heartbeat beneath layers of dust and faith. Do you hear me, old man? He whispered into the void. Your Imperium doesn't need salvation. It needs a new god. And somewhere deep within the golden throne, a single candle flickered in answer. The candlelight within the throne flickered once, then steadied. To the mortals of Terra, it meant nothing, just the faint shifting of energy in the immeasurable machinery that kept the Imperium alive. But to the being watching from across the stars, it was a heartbeat. A reply. Batman stood on the edge of the reborn sun's glow, its fire painting his armor in molten gold. The Chaos Knight was silent, his thoughts spreading across the void like ripples in dark water. He could feel the warp currents twisting, the old gods stirring uneasily. They whispered to one another, ancient rivalries forgotten for a moment in the face of something new. Khorne's rage boiled in the distance, his voice echoing through the tides of unreality. You claim dominion, mortal. No one conquers chaos. The reply came not in words, but in the bending of galaxies. Batman lifted his hand, and a distant nebula flickered its red heart, dimming, its light devoured by shadow. His answer was simple. Then chaos will learn obedience. The warp screamed in response. Every demon, every nightmare, every cursed soul that had once served the Dark Pantheon now felt a new command threading through its essence. It was not worship, not devotion, it was control. The will of a being that had refused godhood, yet could not escape it, and still, somewhere beneath the armor, Bruce Wayne remained. The echo of the man who had sworn an oath to protect, to fight against the darkness, still pulsed faintly beneath the symphony of power. But that voice was fading, smothered beneath the gravity of what he had become. He turned his gaze back to the Imperium below. His presence radiated through its countless systems, whispers of a new god spreading among the faithful. Some called him the Dark Saint, others the Eclipsed One, a guardian who walked where the Emperor could not. Across 1,000 worlds, his image began to appear etched into cathedral glass, painted in fire on the sides of tanks, scrawled in blood on prison walls. A warrior with the wings of night and eyes of burning gold. He never asked for worship, but the galaxy gave it anyway, and from the warp, the laughter of Dezench returned low, resonant, knowing. I told you, little knight, symbols do not die, they transform. The bat lives on. As prophecy, Batman's head tilted slightly, the faintest smile ghosting across his scarred lips. You mistake inevitability for victory. You mistake creation for control, the god replied. You think this empire you're building is yours? It is ours, always ours. Every act of will feeds chaos, even rebellion. The Chaos Knight stepped forward into the cold of the void, his voice steady. Then I will feed it until it chokes. He raised his hand again. Stars flared and aligned across impossible distances, forming a constellation shaped like wings, his symbol written across the heavens. The warp convulsed as if struck, the gods' laughter turning to fury. Planets trembled, astropathic screams filled the void, and still he stood, unmoving. Unmoved dot from terror, beneath the layers of prayer and decay, the Emperor stirred. His mind, fractured but infinite, reached out across the gulf of eternity. And for a moment, just a breath of one, they saw each other. Two men, two gods, two symbols of order forged by suffering. Batman's voice reached him, cold and clear. You tried to build peace through faith. I will build it through fear. The Emperor's whisper came in return, faint as wind over ash. Fear is fleeting, night of chaos, but hope is immortal. The connection snapped. The stars fell silent, and the Chaos Knight, for the first time in eons, hesitated. Hope, the word felt foreign, almost painful. In a universe consumed by madness, Could such a thing still exist? He looked upon his reflection in the void, his armor gleaming like a fallen star. He could see the man he once was, buried deep within a shadow, trapped inside its own creation. He turned from the sun, his cape spreading into wings of shadow. The light behind him dimmed. Somewhere in the deep reaches of the warp, demons and angels alike paused their eternal war. A new law had been written into reality, neither good nor evil, but something in between. Batman, the Daemon Prince, the god of discipline and chaos, vanished into the dark, and where he passed, worlds were remade, laws rewritten, nightmares given purpose. The Imperium called it the Age of Shadow. The Warp called it the quiet between storms. And the gods, in their endless arrogance, whispered one truth that none dared speak aloud. The Bat had taught the Warp to fear. In the dark between galaxies, the Warp was quiet. For the first time in its existence, it listened. The gods had withdrawn to their thrones, and their servants hid in corners of unreality that light itself refused to touch. The Chaos Knight had not destroyed them, but he had done something far worse. He had made them uncertain. He drifted through the void without wings, without fire, leaving behind a trail of silent stars. Wherever he passed, the warp stilled. Its madness coiled in on itself, learning the shape of discipline. Even the Emperor's light flickered in response, pulsing as if caught between admiration and fear. There were worlds now that whispered his name in prayer, and others that screamed it in defiance. On some, he was worshipped as a deliverer. On others, cursed as the shadow of a dead god. But he was beyond both. He sought neither redemption nor empire. He sought understanding when he finally stopped. It was before a fragment of what had once been a World Terror's twin, long since consumed by the warp. Here, time was thin, and reality bled freely. It was the perfect mirror for what he had become. He stood upon the surface, his reflection visible in the broken sky above him, figure of black fire and golden eyes. Wrapped in silence, he spoke into the void. You made me to serve chaos. You made me to fall, but I have found the truth. The warp stirred. His voice carried across eternity. Chaos is not destruction. It is potential. It is creation without conscience. It only needed purpose. The silence thickened. Then, from the fractures of reality, something vast and ancient began to take shape. The warp itself rose against him, coalescing into a shape too large to comprehend a mass of light and shadow, the combined echo of every god that had ever existed. Its voice shook galaxies. You would rule us. He stared at it, unflinching. No, I will replace you. The sky broke open. Waves of power struck him, burning worlds to ash in their wake. Reality folded, gravity screamed, and entire dimensions shattered. Yet through it all, the Chaos Knight stood. Each blow only forged him further. Each scream of the warp only deepened his resolve. He reached out, caught the storm in his hands, and tore it apart. Light and darkness imploded, collapsing into him. He felt everything, every soul, every god, every sin pouring through his veins like molten memory. And then, with a single breath, he exhaled. The explosion rippled through eternity. The warp did not end, evolved. The storm became stillness. The noise became harmony. Where once there had been only madness, now there was structure. Where gods had reigned, now there was balance. When the light faded, he stood alone once more. The fire in his armor dimmed, leaving only faint veins of blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. He looked up at the empty sky. There were no gods left to oppose him, no mortals left to praise him. The galaxy was silent, waiting, and for a fleeting moment, he thought of Gotham the city, the alleys, the sound of rain on stone. He thought of Alfred's quiet voice, of his vow, of the man who had once sworn to save a world from itself. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "I kept my promise." A single star fled in answer. Fragile, defiant, he turned toward it. The shadows of his cape spread behind him like wings of a dying angel. Then he walked forward, fading into the starlight, leaving behind a universe remade by his will. And in the silence that followed, across the distant stars, 1,000 voices whispered the same truth in awe and fear. The bat still watches,